Welcome to Testing Experts with Opinions, an inspired testing podcast aimed at creating conversations about trends, tools, and technology in the software testing space.
Welcome to another podcast. I'm going to stop saying this is our fourth or fifth or sixth or 10th one, because I think I actually got it wrong last week. I think I said it was the sixth and it was the fifth. So yeah, we're going to be discussing something today which often comes up in conversations. And sometimes when we speak to clients, they ask about it. And it's around ISTQB and the, I guess, merits or benefits, the pros and cons of having it versus not having it. I know that there are strong opinions in the community. I watch a lot of videos on YouTube where you have these people in the US giving financial advice, but then stating this is not financial advice. And I almost want to say that today, to say this is our opinion, but it's not our official opinion. It's going to be a conversation based on our own feelings and opinions. So I think let's get started. Who can I go to first? Stefan, let's go to you first. What is your opinion on it? Okay, let me first state this. So when we talk about ISTQB, I mean, it's branched out massively, and you now have a lot of specialization courses. You have the advanced courses in terms of the test manager. You obviously have the agile courses, etc. So maybe let's initially talk about the foundation level, because that is the prerequisite for any of those additional courses. And maybe let's talk about the merits or the pros, cons, benefits of achieving that, and whether we feel it's necessary. So Stefan, just in terms of of your experience, do you believe it's beneficial or not? And I guess why?
I do think it's beneficial. I think for many years now, I think specifically in our industry, there's a lack of certifications and formal education in terms of software testing. And I think ISTQB has filled that gap for many years. And I think there's definitely a place, even if it's just on the theoretical side, having one version of truth globally that people can relate to or refer to in terms of what terminology to use in the world of testing and core testing concepts. I think it definitely has its place in the theory sense. But I guess, and that's not specific to ISTQB, I think in any kind of certification, many times it's purely just theoretical. The real value of just because you have any certification doesn't make you an expert in that. That can be for an engineer or a doctor or anything, I guess. I think it is how you apply that knowledge that you get out of the certification. I think people have sometimes said it's not necessarily, or they don't think it's a good certification because now somebody's done the course, but they still contest. But that's not the course's fault. It's the person potentially that didn't apply it correctly. But the theory, I think, is still solid. So yeah, I think in getting that baseline globally across the testing community, it definitely has a solid place, and not only terminology, but in terms of standards and processes as well. So I think it's definitely good, and I think it's become the de facto thing that people look at if they want some kind of sense of security on a CV. They do look for ISTQB Foundation, and I'm not seeing that. I don't think that'll change in the near future. So yes, and the short answer to it is I think yes, there is a place for it. And you can see it. I mean, it hasn't become stale. I haven't looked on the ISTQB website for a while now, and I was surprised, like you mentioned, how many additional specialist courses there are, and it shows that there's a need, and they're keeping up to date with the current market and the way that testing is evolving. So I think it's still alive and kicking, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
Okay, awesome. But yeah, you alluded to it, and I just want to reiterate. There is no other de facto or default or I guess industry recognized one. I guess ISTQB is the only one, and I was doing some research yesterday just to look at whether there are universities yet offering degrees in software testing, because it feels to me like that's maybe the next step. And the only thing I could find was actually software engineering degrees with a focus on testing. And I wonder whether, I mean, I don't think any of you sat at school or university planning to become a tester one day. And I often wonder to myself whether that's actually changed with the youth today. Are there actually people sitting at school or university with the idea of becoming a tester? And does ISTQB actually give you a really good first step? Because there's nothing else. It gives, at least brings structure. It, like you said, it brings a common, I guess, glossary in terms of terms and that type of thing, a common understanding, regardless of whether you're whatever language you're talking. So from that perspective, there's massive benefits, I think. Just see, Matla, you want to say something?
Oh, yes. I would say prior to ISTQB, I don't think there was like a standard software testing process. So that was brought about by ISTQB. And then like now following up to testing being taught in universities. Myself, having studied computer science, I did coding, but there was no portion like a module to teach you about software testing. And we have seen like now recently with our new interns, the new intake. So they were being exposed to testing in the job market. So I think there's some opportunities for universities to consider software testing either as a degree or in one of the modules, or as one of the modules in the overall computer science degree.
Yeah, I was just going to agree. Just both points earlier from like, there's no. So I do engagement in schools. I'm talking to school children about my job and stuff, and they're like, "How do I become a tester?" And I can never go, "You should do these things and then do these courses." I was like, nearly every tester I've ever spoken to has ended up in testing due to chance, circumstance, or they just have a passion for it and they just ended up doing it. And I guess ISTQB gives you a starter entry route to get you into the profession. But it exists, I guess, because like you said, there is a gap in the market in terms of, if I wanted to be a developer, I won't struggle to find a course on development. I'll struggle to find a degree that teaches me how to do that. In any profession, I don't think you would struggle to find an university level course or qualification to get you into that entry level. It's strange that testing doesn't have that. So I guess the ISTQB is coming because there is that absence of kind of accredited professional qualifications, and it's become out of a necessity more than anything else. But I think it is valuable because nothing else really exists. There's no the single point that you can talk to somebody, at least at a common level, that they understand what testing is.
Yeah, just on the topic of ISTQB and education around testing, TMAP exists. TMAP is a very good certification that is a little bit more practical. But to your point, Steve, it's not as universally adopted than I suppose than ISTQB would be. But TMAP does exist, which helps. And then if you look at software engineering degrees specifically, would I advocate for a testing specific degree? Probably not. As Mamatla said, maybe a module within that, because quality engineering forms part of the whole software engineering life cycle anyway. So I don't think spending 3 years on testing in university, it's going to be tricky creating curriculum for that. But as part of an engineering degree or a software engineering degree, absolutely.
And do you, okay, so based on everyone's opinions, everyone feels it's a good idea. It's worth having a foundation level ISTQB. Okay, no, yeah, and you're disagreeing.
No, I agree with Stefan that it is good. I think we as a testing community should just recognize or realize what it gives you, right? So I'm not saying it's a bad thing. We have to be realistic of what you can and cannot do once you have that. So I think at some stage the testing community start to put too much emphasis on it, and maybe too little at the moment. But it's because we don't really understand the place of ISTQB. And as Stefan, as you said, with any learning, if you take 2 days to learn something, you need to realize that you've only spent 2 days. And with respect, it's a glossary of terms. what do you call this? What do you call that? What do you call that? And that's all you've done for 2 days. Because you can, for ISTQB, you can spend 2 days and write the exam on day 3. A lot of courses in South Africa offers that. So you had 2 days learning words, and that's good because it gives you foundational appreciation of those words and what they mean. But that's all it is. It does not make you something, just as you said, any lawyer or any doctor would. So again, if I take 2 days and I read a pilot's manual, will they let me fly a plane? No. So, well, you're not even getting close to the airport. And that's the same thing with the ISTQB. So yes, you understand the foundational terms, and you can, when someone speaks about it, yeah, that's it. But that is all it gives you. And if we recognize its place in the software world, I think then there is value in it, because at least we all speak the same language.
Yeah, agreed. And I was just like, is it always useful to do it? And I'll go down because I'm a context person. It depends. If you've been a tester for 6 to 10 years and you're now a senior lead running a team of 12 testers, you probably don't need the foundation course. It's probably not going to add much in terms of value to you. If you're brand new into the profession, you're straight at university, you're thinking, I'd like to know a little bit more about testing, certainly so. Or even if you've been doing it for 2 or 3 years, I think it certainly has value, but I don't think it really depends on your career path and the eclectic nature of how testers get into the profession. And I think that's maybe the problem with it, like you've said, of where does it sit in the grand scheme of things. It's not like other professions where if I wanted to be a doctor, okay, I have to do this degree, I have to go to this college, I have to pass the bar if I'm for lawyer or something, and now I'm accredited. I don't think it carries the same weight as something like that, just it's only a smaller course, right? But I think it could maybe help form part of what that is.
Yeah. So in my opinion, if I have a candidate with 5 years of experience in testing, and they do not hold an ISTQB certificate, and then I have a candidate with no testing experience and they hold an ISTQB certificate, I'll go with the tester that has more experience. But what we are seeing now is that recruiters are putting so much emphasis on the certificate, and then we end up losing very skilled candidates.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mamatla. Just coming back to one of the previous points, Stefan, it's also about what we do with it. And I was a test in the Netherlands, a test analyst, and my test manager forced us, and maybe that's a good habit, of when I write a test case, telling him what the test design technique was that I used to write that test case. Right now, it sounds silly, but it started forcing me to think about all the things that I've learned in this ISTQB and now trying to apply it. You made the comment of not, if you don't apply these things, it's pointless. And that test manager actually forced me to say, yes, boundary value analysis or whatever the case, partitioning, right? And then through that, I could refer back to my learnings in the ISTQB and expand my test coverage that way. But that's a practical way of forcing your team, in inverted commas, to actually apply that. And once you start applying those things, then that reference manual is a good thing, because then you can refer back to it and say, oh, which design techniques are important. So having a standardized place for these things is a good thing, if you use it and you start referring back to it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. That's maybe the kind of thing of my journey into it. I did my STQB maybe like a year and a half into testing or something like that, and then going, oh, that's what I'm doing black box testing techniques. I didn't know that's what that was. I knew that's what I was meant to be doing, but then that's what the name of it was, or that phase of testing follows that phase. I was just naturally following what was in front of me in the project. It provides a context and gives you that holistic view, which you don't really have. You don't realize you're doing it, and that course did help me with that for sure. Yeah, it's a really good point.
So one of the critiques of ISTQB is often that it's too theoretical. It's very theoretical, and you can have your ISTQB, and it's not necessarily going to make you a good tester. Do you feel that the ISTQB Foundation certificate prepares testers well enough to actually be able to deal with those real world scenarios and real world challenges that they're going to encounter at their companies?
I would say yes, but not on its own. It needs to be paired with somebody, if let's say a new tester, and they do that, let's say they're brand new, they do the ISTQB, pairing that with a senior test analyst or a lead, helping them to show in the real world, how do you actually apply that? Like Jan said, okay, you've learned about black box testing, but here's a real world scenario where you could apply it, or to understand or differentiate what type you should apply to different scenarios, that you need that human element, that guidance. So, but it is very good to have that, to at least ask, I read about these types of testing. Are you doing it? Or, have you thought about it or identified? It's that reference point. I think that's super important. So yes, but not on its own is my answer.
And I think it helps more with the technical aspect, like the nuts and bolts, the mechanical nature of testing, than it does some of the more business related practical implications. So knowing that I have to make sure I've got my entry and exit criteria all defined and signed off before I move phases, that's great. Like I can now apply that theoretical learning into a practical scenario, but it can't help you with projects. Product owner says, I just want to go live. I don't care that you found that. There's nothing in the ISTQB for how do I deal with that? How do I sell the value of testing back into someone who doesn't understand it? Because the people that you're working with will have not done testing, know about testing themselves. So I don't think it equips you for those kinds of interactions, I would say.
Yeah, I think I also agree that, ISTQB is very theoretical. I think it's because of the fact that the body that offers the certification does not have maybe like the facilities for learners to do practicals. So maybe if there's collaboration between ISTQB and the universities, then the universities will provide a setting for people to be able to, use the theory in real scenarios.
That's
I
a
really
very good
like
point.
that. Sorry, I really like that, Mamatla. It is, if we are saying that it has to form part of we want it to form part of software engineering, maybe that is a good place to start with that theory in a classroom environment. So I like that point.
I think the sad thing is I guess how much emphasis has been put on having an ISTQB. So I was just thinking, if any of you didn't have an ISTQB and there was a job on LinkedIn that you had applied for, there's a very good chance that whoever's filtering all of those applicants on the other side maybe has a keyword to check for ISTQB. Now you're getting ruled out because you don't have your ISTQB. You might actually be the strongest candidate and the best candidate there, but just because you don't have that, you may be not even getting seen. And my question around that is there an over reliance or too much emphasis put on having an ISTQB as a company or a recruitment agency or whoever?
Leon, I think the answer may be yes or no. I'm not sure. Maybe a bit too much. But my short answer is just get it, and then it's not a concern. It's 2 days. A lot of companies are actually saying, we'll pay for you to go do the certification. Like you said, it's 2 days of training, 1 day of writing it. To eliminate that uncertainty, just get it. I mean, I'm looking at, there's so many courses on ISTQB. The only thing people are really worried about is the foundation, not the others. So just do it. I'm saying just do it. I know there's a financial and a time thing, but maybe a bit controversial. But I'm sure if you are talking to an employer and you don't have it, it would be strange almost if they wouldn't support you in getting that certification. And anything over and above, I would think, is a bonus. But I haven't seen many. Sorry, Steve. I haven't seen many other CVs that they, as a mandatory ISTQB certification, is over and above the foundation. Maybe test manager here and there if it's a very senior role, but the others are all over and above, in my opinion.
I was just going to play devil's advocate in that, like, why not just do it? What happens if you're right at the beginning of your journey, you've got a big ton of student debt, and now I have to spend, I don't know, £1,000 or whatever it is on the course and the qualification, and I've just finished my degree. Why do I now need to go and do another qualification that wasn't in my degree? Surely my degree is strong enough. So just to play devil's advocate, and I think in those scenarios, I think that the reason why why people will ask for it as mandatory is because you might have people in recruitment that haven't liaised with the testers in their organization to say it's great if they have ISTQB, but it's not the be all and end all. It doesn't need to be mandatory. It's a nice to have. It's not a mandatory thing. So I think it's mandatory because a lot of recruitment agencies and recruiters aren't testers. I haven't spoken to the testing community about it. And I think the community is pretty split on whether how mandatory is it, and that's maybe why it goes the way it does.
Yeah, I think for me, if you are a lead that is going to onboard somebody with no testing experience and no ISTQB, it's so time consuming to upskill that person, because you first have to start with the terminology. You first have to start with making them understand the process. So I think, yeah, if you don't have any experience in software testing, at least that will be a good start. If you have experience, and it, like for a recruiter, we will say like you shouldn't disqualify people if they don't have the certifications and they have experience. But from a person who's going to onboard a junior with no testing or ISTQB certification, it's very difficult.
Steve, to go back to your point around not everyone comes from the same financial situation. Some people may struggle. Some people may not actually have the cost to do an ISTQB foundation. Do you think we as an industry should be doing more to ensure that there is high quality testing education accessible to everyone, regardless of your financial situation?
Yeah, but I would expand it to, if we talk about quality, not just in engineering, but quality as a practice, and that everyone, even at a primary, secondary school, college, should have an understanding of the importance of quality in any industry that you go into, and having that foundational background would be maybe more helpful than skewing it to everyone needs to have an understanding of testing. Maybe if you're doing computer science, skewing it, I'd certainly make it like a mandatory module to talk about. But I think in general, a lot of industries would really benefit from people having an appreciation for quality management in their systems and how that would impact the wider society. I think it's a good idea.
I don't know who wants to answer this one, but have you noticed any significant differences in career advancement opportunities for people who have an ISTQB versus not have an ISTQB?
Short answer,
Specifically
no.
to the foundation? Sorry, I was just asking if it's specific to foundation.
Yeah, let's talk about just foundation. I think as soon as you start looking at the more advanced levels, I think that answer becomes yes. Because if you have two people with the same sort of experience and the same, I guess, background, but one person has an advanced level test manager or certification, the other one doesn't, I think that becomes more of a factor. But just in terms of ISTQB foundation, have you seen a clear, well, I guess a significant career opportunity? I guess, yeah, career opportunities for people with ISTQB versus no? I definitely haven't.
I think beyond getting you an initial foot in the door with the foundation, I don't believe so. I've never come across someone who's got head of QA position because they've got test manager's qualification, and they're going, oh, that's the final piece in the puzzle that now means you could be head of QA. It's more likely that they've done 6 to 12 years of testing experience across 5 different industries and managed teams of 30, 40 people. Then, yeah, I did a course that took me a week or 2 weeks, or how long that course is. I think, yeah, I think it's maybe the value stream is lessened as you go deeper into it. But yeah, that's just my personal experience.
Okay, so I think let's wrap this up. But I have one final question, which is, you've all obtained your ISTQBs. What is the one thing? I'm sure there'll be more than one thing, but maybe what is the one main thing that you've taken from your ISTQB certification that you maybe still use today? So is there one thing from the foundation certification that you still use today, consider when you're doing testing, consider when you're giving advice?
I think the one thing that stands out is the concept of entrance and exit criteria. I think that's definitely something that I always fall back in any conversation, even in senior level conversations, is that you consider things before you accept it, and that you consider certain criteria before you send it on. So I think that concept to me has stuck.
Yeah, and I was just gonna. I'm skewed, so I'm quite kind of process and documentation. I kind of quite like. So for me, is recognizing that, and this will probably upset some agile people in the room, is that I've never seen a project that's been made worse by adding extra documentation. It's very rare. It's normally the other end of the bell curve, which is we haven't got any documentation on how to do things, and it's led to poorer outcomes. And the ISTQB does kind of favour a more structured and documented approach, but that's pretty kind of just appealing to my nature, I think, more than anything else, more than best practice.
I think for me, I mean, maybe this is just top of mind because we did an internal company presentation the other day on testing types, and it's always like go back to ISTQB because they've got all the documentation. And it was actually quite interesting when we built a mind map about all the testing types that they've defined and how it slots into each other. It creates clarity in a very potentially confusing world with different terminologies and how does this one relate to that one. And when we built it out visually, although it's more theoretical and text heavy, when I converted that into a visual presentation, it does help a lot in the world of testing to understand how the different testing types fits into each other and how you separate them and how they can collaborate or work together to probably test your software. So in terms of me, testing types, yeah, that was quite a good one.
Yeah, for me, I would say requirements analysis, because if we can prevent defects before they get introduced to code, I think I find that valuable. And then also it just shows that quality, like testing does not just start with, dynamic testing. Static analysis is also very important, because people have this misconception that now with testing, after we have written code, then we hand it over to the testers to test. Whereas with static analysis from ISTQB, it teaches you that testing is actually part of the entire software development lifecycle.
So if I remember correctly, I think I did my foundation either in 2002 or 2004. So let's assume that's 20 years. And there's still two things that stick with me. And when I think about ISTQB, those are the first things that come up, and that's boundary value analysis and equivalence partitioning. That to me is what sums up ISTQB. I don't know why those two specific things stuck with me, but when I think of ISTQB, that's always the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, so just as a summary, so if I was to say, we all agree that there is definite value in ISTQB, the foundation level. It brings good structure to how, well, not structure. I guess it structures testing into a good curriculum in terms of covering everything in terms of the basics. It gives you that base level of what testing is about. It covers everything around test processes and test types, etc. And it's probably a good idea for someone that starts out on their testing career journey to actually undertake a foundation level, try and get that certification. But even if you're already fairly experienced, it may have less practical value. But maybe from a applying for jobs in future perspective, it might be a good thing to get it on your CV. So I think it was Stefan that said it's only 2 days or 3 days. So rather make that effort and get it behind your name, even if you don't necessarily agree with it or necessarily think that it will bring value. And then the other thing, obviously, is go and look at the ISTQB website, because there's actually a lot of different courses once you've obtained your foundation level. That's the prerequisite for all of the advanced courses and the specializations. But there's honestly, there are a lot of courses. And I only just realized earlier today that the ISTQB was only created in 1998. So it's only been going for sort of 26 years. It's a long time, but they've expanded massively over the last couple of years in terms of their offerings. So I think they're moving in the right direction. Mamatla, you made a good point about the practical. It's difficult to actually give people that practical knowledge and practical experience. We have that same challenge internally when we have our interns that complete their training, and we have to try and find practical exercises, practical situations for them to actually try and apply what they've learned. So I think ISTQB is always going to suffer, I guess, that pointed remark that it's too theoretical, it's not practical enough. But I think you need to take that theory and try and find situations in your career to actually apply what you've learned practically. Any closing remarks other than maybe it's a good idea to get your foundation level?
And a better idea to start using and applying it.
Agreed.
This has been an episode of Testing Experts with Opinions, an inspired testing podcast. Find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where we're driving conversations.